Good day, everyone. I am Dr. J with my best mate, Cameron, and we are bringing you another episode of Flip the Script podcast. Excuse the glow behind me. It's bright early morning here in Birmingham, and, well, the glow says it all, right? So squint if you have to. Let's get going. What do we got, Cam?
So I think we're doing adrenals today, right?
Correct.
We do have a question I wanted to start off with.
Yes.
Abby, she's from here in Birmingham. She wants to know if we could possibly touch on perimenopause on the podcast because she has some early onset signs of the perimenopause.
Yes. Okay. Well, good point. Let her know, Abby, that we will be presenting a podcast on just that and some of the other hormonal issues. We were talking about this not too long ago. So we want to do a podcast on perimenopause and the other hormone-related issues. However, it just so happens what we'll be discussing today, good point, because we are talking adrenal glands today, and perimenopause, as you're going to find, actually has some of its roots in this particular gland and this particular connection to the adrenal glands. So let's get started. Stress, anxiety, and the adrenal gland connection is what we're going to discuss today. And this topic's a hot one. You're going to be amazed how many people actually have this condition. And I think it was Hans Seeley who said, it's not stress that kills us, but it's our reaction to it. So, is there something we can do to increase our forces and improve our function? Absolutely, positively. Sadly, we're not learning this in today's society. But we're going to bring it to you today, all right? So, who should be considered in adrenal fatigue? In my opinion, Cameron, everyone. And I wrote this in my first book, Light Your Fire. It was a case of, and I could have written an entire, half the book could have been on nothing but this adrenal fatigue symptoms and syndrome, should I call it, that we have in our society today, especially in America. So it's not a case of show me somebody who is stressed, brother. Show me somebody who's not. If you would, on my adrenal fact sheet that I present to my patients, if you would flip that other side on that, start on that one. I want to just go over a few. There's quite a few symptoms, but let's just talk about some of the more popular ones. And listen if this doesn't sound like somebody you know.
Difficulty getting up in the morning, continuing fatigue. Yeah, not relieved by rest.
Correct.
Cravings for salt or salty foods.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Lack of energy, lightheadedness when quickly standing up.
Okay, we'll touch on that. Correct.
Hot flashes in both male and females.
Men included.
Mm-hmm. Increased effort required to do everyday tasks.
Just simple tasks. How many women do I hear that from trying to keep up with the kids?
Increased time needed to recover from illnesses.
Sick all the time. Seems difficulty getting well.
Decreased enjoyment, lack of zest or happiness. So kind of like sort of like depression symptoms, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Get up and go. Got up and gone.
Thoughts are less focused and fuzzier. Memory is less accurate. Central midsection obesity, very difficult to lose. It kind of seems like a lot of people might think they have depression, but they just have adrenal fatigue.
Burnout adrenal fatigue,
Yeah.
which would depress you, which we're going to talk about today, because a lot of these people who wind up with these conditions, especially those who fall in the autonomic disorders, that's what they wind up putting them on.
Yeah.
But I mean, can you imagine though, if you're just trying to keep up and you're fatigued all the time, depressed, you think? Yeah, I can see that. However, that's just a symptom. So let's fix the problem. And that's what I'm hoping we can enlighten people on today. So That's why it's so important to protect your adrenal glands. If you protect these things, you're going to increase your resiliency, people. You're going to increase your capability and your capacity to get a hold of life, which for a lot of people, it just seems to be coming undone, if you will. So, functions of the adrenal gland. Again, listen to some of these. Blood pressure balance. So, when I talked about it in the first book, if you have blood pressure issues, you want to get to the underlying cause, not just taking some medication to bring it to within this hypothetical number that's been, in a sense, in my opinion, just kind of arbitrarily just pulled out for perfect man, perfect female, which that's not life. So blood pressure imbalances, water retention, we're going to talk about that. Fluid balance is also the responsibility of the adrenal glands through aldosterone. Don't let me get ahead of myself. And you know how that is. If we drop 10 or 15 pounds of water weight, what happens to our blood pressure? Boom, drops down, right? So here's the correlation between the two. Now, another thing we're talking about with that fluid balance issue, here's another little pearl. Amazing. Swelling of the ankles, especially in the afternoon. Now, when this occurs, we have other issues. It could be, kidney related, cardiovascular. So for a lot of people, it's a spooky situation, and they get these other things ruled out, and then they're in this no idea what's causing that, because again, adrenal fatigue is not on the radar in our health community today, in large because it's not taught in schools, not in medical schools, and even in chiropractic college. I didn't go through some of the things that I'm going to present today, like the HPA axis. This is the connection between the hypothalamus and the pituitary and the adrenal gland. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But in the medical curriculum, it's not even on the radar for a hypoadrenal or adrenal fatigue, which I think is ludicrous, because I promise you, in my clinical opinion, 70, if not plus, amount of the American population has some degree of adrenal fatigue. But because there's not an ICD-10 insurance code to bill for it, guess who's not learning it? Sad. Corporate healthcare. For another day. So we have the fluid imbalance, and then we have the regulation of the inflammatory responses within the body. An example of that would be skin-related issues, inflammation, and even the chronic fatigue associated with the muscles and the inability to recover. How about IBS, irritable bowel? All right, inflammation. All right, the connection to that, to the adrenals, you bet you. Also supports the immune response. Again, since it's a direct supporter of the immune system, upgrade the immune system, that's why we find that when we have weak adrenals, we have difficulty getting well. But think about two things now. We have an inflammatory issue, and we have a issue with the immune system response. Does that ring a bell for my autonomic disorder diagnosed patients? Now. And we know how difficult that is to find a diagnosis for autoimmune disease. This is the most overlooked issue associated with it. I'm going to talk about this. My patients I treat for autoimmune disorders, every one of them has a connection to adrenal fatigue. Not treated by most physicians. So, the production also of all steroid hormones have their connection here. So, Abby, like we were talking, the question asked earlier, perimenopause, here's your connection, okay? All of these steroid hormones start with cortisol. Then we move on to the aldosterone. And from aldosterone, that's where we're talking about regulates the sodium homeostasis balance with the kidneys. Then we move down to testosterone, male, female. all estrogens, estradiol, estrone, and esterol, all of these have their connection again to the adrenals. So when we talk about menopause or perimenopause, if these glands are functioning properly, we should not be struggling with these issues. And show me a mother of 1, 2, 3 children is not showing early signs today because of our stress put on the caregivers. And then, of course, progesterone. Now, correlation here. All of these are derived, Cameron, from cholesterol.
So you're saying stress brings on perimenopause earlier?
Sure it will. Burned out adrenals will bring on the inability to handle the changes occurring with the endocrine system that will have the effect on the perimenopause and menopause as well. We'll talk about how that's really not a normal. It's normal in our society, but if the adrenals are working, okay, they kick in for the ovaries as their ovaries start to come to their duty done, all right? And if they function properly, then we should not have to go through the hot flashes that we were talking about and other menopause and perimenopause type related issues. But they're all derived from cholesterol, Cam. So why in hell, again, are we going back to doctors want to lower my cholesterol for a hypothetical number chosen to recoup finances by the pharmaceutical companies? Again, doctor, why? Ask, why is my cholesterol elevated? Could this be a reason? Absolutely, positively. So don't touch my cholesterol because, in my opinion, that is nothing to do with why they're prescribing it anyway, which is cardiovascular disease. Get out of here. Okay, so with that one, Maestro, would you mind? Flip a switch. What else you got for me there, brother?
Nothing. I did last night see a video of a guy, some famous bodybuilder guy was talking about cholesterol, and he was just saying all the same stuff that you said when we did the episode about cholesterol. And he was talking about how anytime anyone goes to a doctor, they're just getting put on a statin and this and that. And he was like, you just need to look at your food. So I think some more people in that space of like fitness and stuff are starting to like look at that. Because if you look at like Alex, for example, of like how in depth some of these coaches go, they're starting to like see all of this stuff and learn all this stuff that like you're starting to see, how like cholesterol is demonized and how it shouldn't be.
Yeah. Well, that started back in the 1960s with Ansel Keys, where he was certain that was why President Eisenhower had his heart attack. So blah, 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 blah. That's the story behind. And that's where that myth started. And, of course, the powers that be in the pharmaceutical found a way to fatten up a wallet real quick. And, again, the connection of one that isn't necessarily the causation of another, all right? So, therefore, we need to look a little deeper, and doctors, that's what we need to do. There's a reason for it. Like we talked before, they do not check hormones on people the majority of the time when you go in and get your blood work done. That's just a standard test that's ran. Downstream, again, like this, it makes the hormones. And so if hormones are low, we want our cholesterol to go up. So that's physiology doing what it's supposed to do. And this is what we're finding out. The more you study, it doesn't take a lot, just a little bit. That's why empower your people to study just a little bit, or be informed other than just what the guy in the white coat says all the time, because sometimes his education ended when he got his diploma. Sad.
Crazy good point.
Let's get on with these adrenals here. Just a little bit more in a conversation on this gland, because that's a great point. And this is where all this ties together with these glands. So the adrenals are walnut-sized, maybe a little smaller gland that sits above the kidneys. And again, like I said, supports all our stresses, both physical. So even when we're kicking it in the gym, exercising, we want to keep our strength up. We have to have a recovery, and that's what our adrenals do. Emotional, as you're going to find here in the history that I'm going to talk about some of my patients, mental stresses, all of these, right? All of them Sound like anybody you know? Sound like most everybody I know. Somebody needs to be teaching this long before we get out of pre-med, chiropractic, and medical school, because it's all over the place. Also, key thing with this, maintains the balance of our glucose levels. So what are we talking about here? Dysfunction there leads to what? Type 2 diabetes. Think it's through the roof? Yeah. Correlation again. Type 2 diabetes and obesity. What is that now? 50+%, Chris, of the American population now? Put in that category, certainly in the adult population. And almost what, I think that's about the population now of the children as well in this country, right? So we have that. Also supports, again, like I was talking about, the inflammatory response. So we think about this, IBS, Crohn's, again, autonomic disorders, right? So if we, pro-inflammatory, we need the adrenals to calm the inflammation. It's a major contributor that, like I said earlier, all autoimmune diseases. And, Abby, a very strong connection to perimenopause and another issue on the rise, PCOS.
Yeah, that's
polycystic ovarian syndrome.
That's jumped way up.
Yes. And I mean, we're seeing this earlier and earlier.
Teenagers.
High
schoolers.
Well, as a matter of fact, one of your friends, 2 sisters came in, twins. Both of them had it, right? Mm-hmm. And basically got it under control very, very quickly at that age because, fortunately, they're young and they respond quickly. But, it was just a matter of adrenal support and cutting out those carbs and those glutens. Ouch. Mm-hmm. Everybody. There's that connection again. So, again, I put all this back to the same timeline. Wow, mid-'80s. So at least we have an understanding of why. So if we have the understanding of why, we can address this. And that's the thing about the autonomic disorders. So many people, by the time they get this diagnosis, they've had it for so many years. And like you were talking about earlier, you wind up on an antidepressant and that's really the treatment in the medical system for the most part is, well, here, that or a biologic. And these biologics, look at the side effects of these damn things. Death is one now. And sometimes the actual condition that they're trying to suppress, be it a skin-related issue, for example, eczema or whatever, what's the side effect of it? Worsening. So it's a horrible, horrible route to have to take. And it's a route that you don't have to, if we can understand how this all comes about. So metabolism, we talked about the metabolism of fats and the proteins, and most importantly, the carbohydrates. So again, type 2 diabetes, obesity, there's your connection. And again, also remember the adrenal glands, right, convert cholesterol into cortisol. So does it make sense then if I'm lowering my cholesterol, doctor, that I am also decreasing my cortisol available to react to my stressors? Oh, wow. Another problem, another symptom caused by another medication. And then they'll put you on another 2 or 3 down the line from that, right? Because we're decreasing our ability to cope with.
Regulate.
Yeah, our daily lives, right? Thank you, Chris. So, again, go back over some of those clinical insights, if you will, of adrenal fatigue. Mm-hmm. Key one here, we were talking about the dizziness and the lightheadedness upon rising, all right? Why? How's that? Well, the adrenal glands, what their job is to do is that when we go from a seated, or certainly from lying down, all right, our blood pressure needs to go up to increase that sustain of that energy on the nervous system, right? So that's the job of the adrenals. So if they're burned out and fatigued, guess what happens when you stand? The opposite. Instead of blood pressure going up, it drops. And this makes us dizzy, faint. And some people actually will fall. So now if I'm an elderly and I have a fall, does that increase the likelihood of a hip fracture? Bet your butt it does, right? What's the key to not breaking a hip? Well, don't fall, right? Okay, so again, ringing in the ears is another one. I have with a lot of my patients, especially, about that midlife area. And it's frustrating. And who would have thunk the adrenal glands, right? See, so they go in, they ENT, all types of other issues, thinking blood pressure and everything else. Well, there's a correlation with that because there's a correlation with the adrenal glands, right? But this is a very annoying situation for patients and very frustrating. So go to the adrenal glands. Outside the box, that's the way we got to think, doctors. And then, of course, the other one you were talking about, cold sweats. Dude, middle of the day. Guys have it too. It's called andropause. It happens. The hot flashes and the night sweats again. Perimenopause, we're seeing it earlier and earlier. A lot of my women, I kid you not, still in their 30s, are complaining of this issue now. All right? So, and then major side effect, our connection with this is anxiety and panic attacks, which personally I've never had one of those, but I understand they are spooky bad. And some of my patients, I've heard of them having one while driving with their kids in the car on an interstate and literally have to pull over because of such extreme fear. So look to the adrenal glands. It's starting to sound like most everybody to some degree, right? So let's get a handle on this. Here's another one. I had this with a patient. She came in the other day. And she's a mother of 2 children, but they're older now. They moved on into their adulthood. But she's still young. I mean, especially for me, she's in her 50s, early 50s, right? And she says to me, she says, Joey, she goes, I don't know what's going on. She goes, I had this desire to cry for no reason whatsoever. We call it weepy. If you're sitting there watching a cat commercial on television and you start busting into tears, that might be a sign, people, okay, that we've got adrenal fatigue. Interesting, but true. So, root causes for stress. Think emotional, right? Key here. So when we talk about emotional, what are we talking? Well, loss of love, breakups, right? Those are going to happen, and direct effect, stress on the adrenal glands. So if we go through quite a few of those and we don't reboot these adrenal glands and give them the food, the nutrition they need, can you see how we're slowly just completely draining these as time goes by? Especially with our diets that are so poor in the nutrients necessary to support them, and loss of loved ones. Everybody experiences that sometime in their lifetime. Again, but I also want to touch on this one, which any type of major emotional trauma can kick these in, Cam. And this is what I found extremely, extremely interesting with my patients when I started treating a lot more of these autonomic disorders. This, in a sense, I read a book by a psychiatrist by the name of Gabor Mate. And in the realm of the angry ghost, I believe it was. Anyway, and he talked about the HPA axis in there. So this is, it was cool to see that the psychiatrists are grabbing onto the understanding between the link in this endocrine system as well. But and this got me to thinking with my patients the correlation between the two of these. And what I started asking a lot of my patients, was that the name of the book? Did you Google that?
It's Gabor Mate. Yeah, he's Hungarian and Canadian.
Uh-huh.
He's got several books. Hold on.
Oh, yeah, he does. So, but here's the connection that really blew me away. When I started...
in the realm of Hungry Ghosts, yeah.
The realm of Hungry Ghost. Good read. So that had me thinking when I was dealing with my autonomic disorder patients, to ask them this question. And interestingly, 70% of most diagnosed autonomic disorders happen to be female. And there's a correlation in quite a few of them, this being one of them, of course, the adrenals, that I write about in my first book, again, Light Your Fire. So and kind of set up this light to ask this question with these autonomic disorders. And the question I would ask them was, I want you to think about for me, And I'm expecting an answer maybe in a week or so. But I said, I want you to think deep if you can come up with a correlation of where there might have been some kind of major emotional stress or trauma in your life prior to the onset of the symptoms of the autonomic issues. And Cameron, I can't think of a single case where that incident was not blurted out within minutes. It was kind of mind-blowing to me, but almost right off the tongue. I mean, some very interesting things, whether it was a death of a loved one, a father, whether it was one of my patients was in her freshman year in college and her second semester, and she had a roommate that was just completely stressed her out, fatigued her. And that was her onset. I had another patient of mine who had preeclampsia and wound up in the hospital, and husband was nowhere to be found. But that's what she remembered as the onset. And she was high on the spectrum. That was so. Then to get there again. So see, we have emotional connections too, people, and we have to address those emotional connections as well. We have to find what those are, and we must address those as well. Whether it's your job, for some people it's a job, or maybe it's a relationship that you don't belong in. But if you don't get those things under control and you don't address that issue, that subconscious stress, not so subconscious, but that thing that's eating at you, they're going to eat at those adrenal glands because they're your fight or flight glands. Now, there was a time, right, back when we were being hunter and gatherers, and if we were being chased by the saber-toothed tiger, and boom, we needed those adrenal glands, right? We needed that rush. We needed that, reaction to fight or flight, okay? So, but then we jumped into a cave somewhere, and the tiger missed us, and our stress came down. So that sudden increase, that's where the cold plunge, for example, works. Or if we have a situation where we get out in the yard and we break a little sweat, that's okay. That's stress put on the body temporarily, and that's good for the adrenals to have the ability to adapt. But the long-term stress is what they were not designed for because, over the last 60,000 years, we haven't evolved into a society like we have today, where everything seems to be bombarded on us, right? We don't tend to let things go. We don't jump into the cave, the tiger goes by, boom, we're back out, we go, yeah, we missed that one. No, we carry things. We carry the past with us. We have a difficult time letting go. And then we now also have these processed foods and whatnot in the high-carb diets that are depleting us and our glands' ability to function as well. So, pandemic, you bet your backside. Connection. So, finances are another one. How about Joe Biden's economy? Did that kick some adrenals in the butt, or what? But it's real, and even a move. Like hey, for example, a good example of that is college kids graduate. Let's say from here, and they're used to living in our area here in Birmingham, and all their friends that they've grown up with over time, family, and then they graduate college and they get a job somewhere far away, be it New York, some major big city, and they're used to smaller city lifestyle. Boom, that's a trauma, major trauma, and for a lot of them, it kicks them back, puts them right into these signs of adrenal fatigue, those ones that you were talking about earlier. So that's why I say it's not a case of show me somebody who is stressed, try to show me somebody who's not. Good luck there. And when we look at this lack of control, I think is key. That's why in my books and in my practice, I want to empower my patients with the understanding of this. One of the biggest problems that we do is we tend to give our health over to the person in the white coat, and we lose all control. And that is stressful for us. Adrenals are stressful because so few physicians understand them. So then we have the anxiety up on top of that, and we don't have control of our health. So if I can give them the understanding, if this podcast can give you the understanding of the connection, now we have the know. And if we know and understand, now we have better control. And that's what we have to try to obtain. And hopefully that's what we'll be able to give some people, better understanding, control, and understand the direct effect that this has on the HPA axis, which Gabor-Mate talked about in his book. This was not taught to me in school in the 1990s, the late 80s and early 90s. When you find this rolling off of a doctor or scientist's tongue, you know this guy is up to date on what's being learned about the endocrine system and the connection between the emotions and our overall function of the adrenal system. And that is what is known as the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, otherwise known as the HPA axis. Again, this is your area that regulates all stress because emotions are embedded in the hypothalamus. It's the emotional center of the body, of the brain, known as the limbic system. Sits right up there next to the pituitary. Directly connected to the adrenals. This is the interesting thing. The hypothalamus is directly connected to the adrenals in that feedback loop. So I used to say, and I write in my first book, the art, when we look at aging process itself, the connection between the pituitary, known as the master gland, I kind of have my second thoughts on that one. This hypothalamus, and because of its direct connection with the adrenals and the loop back system, it's not back up to the pituitary, it's back up to the hypothalamus. So I'm giving this guy some big kudos, you know, as far as the overall master gland of the body. I think the emotions play a big part in, and of course the pituitary regulates the hormones, but it gets its info and its messaging from the hypothalamus. So that's why the understanding of this HPA axis is a game changer in these adrenal related issues. Because we talked about, again, trauma, both emotional and physical, environmental. We were talking about this, remember? And matter of fact, the same thing with Abby's question. Remember we were talking about in a podcast or two ago, we talked about the hormonal disruptors when we were talking about the chlorophyll and that connection with the phthalates.
Phthalates, yeah.
Okay. So again, endocrine disruptors, endocrine adrenal glands, right? So here again, another reason why we're being bombarded on a daily basis with the phthalates, which were found in the scents and the formulas, kids' plastics. See why Americans, I'm talking about, who doesn't have an issue here? Find you a doctor who understands this. Make a change in your world. And since we're dealing with the hypothalamus, the HPA axis, all dominant thoughts, brother. Negative thoughts depress the body, have the effect on the adrenal glands. That's why when we get the good day, we get the happy day and we're up, signs of adrenal fatigue kind of take a back seat for a little while anyway. Got it. So, tools for HPA axis function. Always think endocrine, anything that strengthens the endocrine system. So my primary endocrine system strengthening and regulating supplements, I use 3 primarily that support the regulation of this. Bingo. Herbs, tonics, I love glandulars, and the PMG protomorphogen, which you're only going to find through doctors who understand through standard process. And yes, you got it. And the herbs. Yes. And any herb that can calm you is going to help you. I got that sign there, Christopher. Thank you. So let's do a little quick overview on some of the things we were talking about. What? Adrenal fatigue, dysfunction, tired upon awakening, right? Mm-hmm. These are the people go to bed. You have what's known as circadian rhythms. The adrenals have 4 rhythms, all right? Basically through the day. So that's why you really can't study these things with a blood test, because when you pull cortisol tests when you go and give blood, if you have 4 different rhythms, if any one of these rhythms, and typically we study them early morning upon awakening, noon, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and sometime around late evening, 10, midnight's best. If they're off at any one time, all right, they're supposed to be the highest in the morning and the lowest when you go to bed. But if you have adrenal dysfunction, you can be lowest in the morning, and that's the reason why you'll wake up tired when you wake up. And there may be elevated at night when you should be low going to bed. And that's what we talk about, the person who we're going to talk about in a minute, wired and tired, can't calm, okay? Unmotivated, right? Just you get up and go, got up and gone. Emotional, weepy, we talked about that. Just feel for no reason whatsoever, feel like crying. Immune challenges, again, think about all these immune challenges, autoimmunity type stuff, slow to recover. You know, suddenly you notice that, hey, this past year I've been sick often, not recuperating as like you used to. Think your adrenal glands. Sick often. Chris, if you would. So we, again, see the connection. So let's kind of, going a little longer than I usually do on this one, but let's kind of get to, all right, doc, what do I do? How do you go about replenishing and re-strengthening these glands? Because it's doable. That's the cool thing. 3 primary clinical phases of adrenal fatigue. Let's talk about those. Phase 1, we were just talking about that. Wired up, on the go. This is the person that has difficulty unwinding. They have difficulty chilling and resting. Fail to calm. Phase 2 is when you're wired, but you're tired. And sadly, this is the person that tends to get that second wind late in the evening, right? Poor sleep. Or falls asleep, wakes back up and can't get back to sleep. Talk about that one as well. There's a correlation there as well. And then again, then you get phase 3, the exhaustion phase. It's coming. It's just a matter of when. That's when you hit the wall, start setting in motivation, emotional lows. Again, like I say, get up and go, got up and gone. Next, body failing. Boom. Now we've hit the wall. Now we have a host of different things they're going to treat us for, depression being one of them, right? Okay, we're not depressed people. And of course, cholesterol is going to be low, so you go in there and they're going to make this thing even worse cholesterol is going to be elevated because cortisol is low, and now they're going to turn around and make it even worse. Is that a word? Worse. So, supplements to treat these? Yes, you bet. In my clinic, I like to start off with feeding the body properly, dropping those nasty carbs and processed foods. We need to give the body nutrients. That's what it lives for, especially certain vitamins found in foods, and I'm going to bring those to you in just a minute. But before I get to that, so that's where I'm using the activating herbs that I'm using to boost the adrenals. So I'm looking for that and the glandular support that we were just talking about earlier. All right. However, certain adrenal glands, companies and products are better than others, so you want to make sure you're finding a high quality product. And then that's phase 1, and then I move into phase 2, which is basically we're keeping with phase 1, but I'm starting to add in that HPA axis support that we were talking about. And there again, I'm using these protomorphogens that I'm using from Standard Process, because Roy Lee has the patent, and he developed these about, 60 plus years ago. All right, they're the game changer. They're what make the difference. You're not going to find these from your standard doctor, your pharmacy. These are sort of in the toolbox of the practitioner or pharmacist that uses the Standard Process protocols.
And what are those?
Those are the nuclear, the DNA, RNA replications, and also the cytosol around the cell's nucleus as well. These are the food products of these particular organs, whether it's an adrenal gland, whether it's the liver, whether it's the hypothalamus, whether it's the pituitary, that feed these glands the food that they need, sort of like a blueprint for them to be able to strengthen and rebuild the particular gland, unique to Standard Process only. Then I get into phase 3, which is phase 1 and 2, with a little bit more added glandular support, and then I'm going to drop in and give them the sleep support that they need to replenish the adrenals as well, get back into the sleep rhythm. So, sleep support for adrenal dysfunction, one great one. Kava, the herb kava is good. GABA, gamma, aminobutyric acid, another good one. Calm the system, lets you calm the system. Able to sleep. Clinical studies have shown that the kava has been helpful for general anxiety and the panic attacks that we were talking about. So there's some good studies out on kava, and it's again something that takes a little time, build it up in the body, right? But phenomenal herbs. And then we go into sleep itself. We've talked about this before in our sleep podcast and also just in our mineral podcast. Sleep. Falling asleep is a different issue than staying asleep. Falling asleep, I want you to think this is where the kava comes in, but remember our discussion about the magnesium. People have a problem falling asleep, have an amped up sympathetic nervous system. We need to bring that down and regulate, bring up the parasympathetic nervous system, and that's where we're thinking minerals. And remember, we're not finding them in soil, and we're not doing the green leafies. That's where I like the magnesium. So I like to start with somewhere around 300 milligrams at night right before bed. Some people need more. When I'm using Easy Mag, which is my favorite from Standard Process, I usually recommend starting off with 3 tablets. If we still have a problem with the patient maintaining the sleep, I might increase it a tablet or 2. Now, that's the issue when it comes to staying asleep. We roll over to that. That's where the magnesium, like I said, I might up it a little bit if I have a problem staying asleep. But also think sugar and balancing problems here. We talked about this in the past. That person goes to bed, try to avoid that eating, especially the carbohydrate, after 7 o'clock at night. You go to sleep, right? The blood glucose drops, cortisol kicks in, you wake up, and difficulty getting back to sleep. This person has a sugar handling problem. We need to think about, something in the neighborhood of 10, 15, maybe 20 grams, depending on your weight and size of protein. Whether it's a protein drink, boiled egg, something like this, get up. It's the blood sugar issue. If not, you're going to lay in bed, you're staring at that clock, and every hour you're getting more and more anxious, more and more anxiety, more and more burnout of the adrenal glands. So quiet them down by getting them protein, not carbohydrates. And then lastly, is the one that wakes tired. We talked about that. That's just straight up your adrenals, pal. All right, if we study these, we'll find in the studies. And remember, I use a saliva test because the saliva test allows me to test all 4 of those rhythms. So I send the patient home with it. They just simply put the saliva into the tube. We send it off, and we can find out where the rhythms are off. Then we can correct those rhythms. So what's beautiful about having the test here with the adrenals this way is that we can document, here's where we're off. Then, a month or 2 later, we can perform the test again, and we see where we're back in balance. And the beautiful thing there is most of my patients know they're back in balance because their lives have changed. They're sleeping now. They have the energy. So then again, we want to think about that. And we talked about the herbs for sleep. Valerian root, another very good one. My favorite, ashwagandha. Doesn't make a difference if you're up and down. It will balance you out. And then, of course, California poppy is another good one. And that's how we go about restoring these glands back. Now, one other little connection, major connection. Everybody needs to know when we talk about the nutrition. Vitamin C and the adrenal connection. Because in my opinion, everybody in this country has a touch of scurvy, vitamin C deficiency, and one of the ways that that's proven is the adrenal issues. Besides the fact that we're taking synthetic, fake vitamin C as well, which is driving the problem even worse. So think vitamin C. Why? 40 to 50% of our body's vitamin C is stored in those adrenal glands. Wow. Yeah. And what does high stress do? Depletes that vitamin C reserves. And when we have vitamin C deficiency reserves, for example, real vitamin C, not ascorbic acid, here's some science for you. How about capillaries become weak and fragile? Well, what is that? How about varicose veins? Spider veins? Mm-hmm. Huh? How about that? Bruise easily. These are clinical signs. Vitamin C has a high source of what's known as bioflavonoids. They help prevent this. And specifically a product in there called rutin, which you're not going to get in the synthetic vitamin C. This gives the strength and the tone, if you will, to the vascular system. So low levels of this are also associated with high C-reactive protein, known as CRP, which is, to me, probably one of the best primary precursors to cardiovascular disease and stroke waiting to happen. Adrenal glands, anything with the glandular support system, these supplements are all great sources of vitamin C complex. Vitamin C complex, not ascorbic acid, people. So let's wind this thing down with a little bit of info on the whole food approach to adrenal support. What can we do on a daily basis? Number one, my favorite, B vitamins derived from whole food sources. Again, that Cataplex B Core we talk about. I put my patients on this right away because that is going to jumpstart their energy almost immediately. I like to go there. And then we were talking about the glandular support, adaptogens, the herbs that we were talking about earlier, the ashwagandha, ginseng, start there. And some beautiful herbal tonics that MediHerb has out, with 3 or 4 herbs in there together. Beautiful way to start. Again, licorice. Depending upon with licorice, watch yourself, high blood pressure people. We got to kind of work our way into the licorice, but ashwagandha, ginseng. And then lastly, lifestyles that adrenal support diets. I want you to think Mediterranean style. When we talk about Mediterranean, though, remember the people who live along this shoreline, if you will, what do they have in common? Well, there's a lot of fish, a lot of olive oil. So we have a lot of good fats. We have the omega-3 fats in the diet. We have lots of good protein, very, very low processed food. That's the key issue here. And of course, their carbs are a better carb than we're getting here, right? And with that lifestyle, they're moving more. Low to no sugar. And this is where a lot of people go, oh my God, I can't do this. All right. I didn't say go no. Let's just try to go low. Let's start there. Minimal intermittent fasting, we talked about that as well. If people could just kind of get used to finishing eating at 7 o'clock, and let's try not to put anything high glycemic in us before noon. That should be an easy do, people. That takes the stress off of that blood sugar regulating adrenal glands. And so think about it, dude. If this is pro-adrenals, then it doesn't take a rocket scientist to think about anti-adrenal support diets, which would be, Cam, carbohydrates and sugars, brother. The American Western diet. So, here we are. That's the skinny. Hopefully it's not, hopefully that's just straightforward, common sense.
Yeah.
But you understand how many people out here have this? And because it's not being taught, everybody's running around with so many of these problems and symptoms and don't know that there's something that can be done. Find you a doctor that understands the HPA axis. Find you a doctor who does more than just treat symptoms. Find you a doctor who educates you, empowers you, and learn about this HPA axis connection. Find you a doctor who understands this. It's starting to come out. Seen a lot of it the past 10 years. So, again, I'm passionate about this one because I'm telling you it affects, my opinion, 70+% of this society. And it's time we get it under control. Autonomic disorders are through the roof. Obesity is through the roof. And guess what all happened right around the same time, people? Again, we're talking about early to mid-'80s, the connection. Put it together. It's not rocket science. It's time for, what is that? Maha. Mm-hmm. Let's go. Bring it on, people. We've got the knowledge. Let's do this. So until next time, I guess that's what I got for now. Abby, I hope that helped you with some of your questions, but we will jump on perimenopause soon. And again, thanks for your time. Don't forget to opine. Give us a thumbs up. Say, hey, what you think. And always stay consciously aware of your awareness of your consciousness. And as always, Until next time, have yourself a great day.
So you ain't missing one.
Thank you. For Cameron and myself and Chris, until next time, have a great day.